Okay, so just how do you deliver safe, low-value projects at the busiest single runway airport in the world? Hopefully through the course of this presentation you'll get some insight into that. My name is Julian Raison, I'm the head of the Operations Project Management Office at Gatwick Airport. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do at Gatwick. We'll give you some background to the airport, some of our history, talk to you a little bit about how we deliver capital projects at the airport, but specifically talk to you about how we do those complex, low-value projects that are really at the heart of our operation. So I should just, having sat through a couple of the previous presentations, I should manage your expectations. If you're expecting to sit here and look at lots of data and systems, you may be disappointed. This is about how we deliver projects, how we put controls in place to make sure that we deliver those projects within that operational environment and manage the impact that we have on the operation as well. So those of you who are into lots of data and systems and stuff may want to leave now, but hopefully you'll want to stay. So yeah, I'll talk to you through a bit of the overview of Gatwick Airport, an overview of our capital investment plan, and then look particularly at 5 or 6 key areas of our learnings so far, and then talk to you about what we're going to do in the future as well. So, a bit of an overview of Gatwick Airport. So a bit of history here. Some of you may not know that Gatwick Airport was originally a racecourse. Back in the early part of the last century, Gatwick was a racecourse with a small station attached. You see the programme in the top left there, the race card from 1912. Back in the 30s, the original terminal was built called the Beehive. That still exists. It's now part of the CAA buildings, which are off-site from the airport now. And then what is the current South Terminal building was constructed in the 1950s. You see there a picture in the bottom right of what the airport looked like back in the 1950s. The airport was also used during the war. It was commissioned or requisitioned by the military for a night flying base during World War II as well. So more recently, the North Terminal was constructed in the 1980s. And the runway lengthened to its current length of about 3.5 kilometres as well, which clearly the one on the bottom right isn't. So just moving on to more current history. In 2009, Gatwick Airport was sold by British Airports Authority and became an independent operator. At that time, we had 30 million passengers, and we just started out on a £2 billion investment programme to get us to be punching up with the really big international airports and the place out in West London. So now we're in 2016, 7 years on. We've moved from that 30 million passenger mark up to 43 million passengers this year, still on the single runway with 2 terminals. We're the busiest single runway airport in the world by some distance. On a peak hour, we have 55 movements an hour, world record, on the runway. And in our peak day last summer, we had 949 movements in one single day. We now serve 50 long-haul destinations from Gatwick, and we're planning to grow even further with that single runway as well. So you can save all your R2 questions up for later on. Just wanted to show you a bit of a video about some of the, just to highlight some of the projects, and you'll get a bit of a feel for how we deliver projects at the airport. So we're quite lucky where we work. It's easy to produce nice, sexy videos like that. I used to work in the water industry, and you can't do that. You'll have seen a lot of that video featured one of the major projects that we've just delivered. Some of my colleagues in our major projects team delivered the world's largest self-serve bag drop facility. And that is part of what it said in the video about making the passengers in charge of their own destiny as they go through the airport, so making a lot more of that process self-service and in the passengers' hands. So I'm now going to come and talk about how we deliver small projects. There's a lot of, the big, expensive, complex projects featured in that video. But the piece of the programme that I deliver and why we exist is because a lot of our capital programme now is moving to smaller value projects. When Gatwick was first sold off by BAA, the programme was much more about big set-piece, multi-million-pound projects. The programme now is much more about smaller value, asset replacement and resilience type projects. And we realised that we needed a different approach to those smaller value projects compared to the major projects. So back in 2014, my team was formed. We're called the Ops PMO, the Project Management Office, but we're really there to deliver operational projects within that live operation, typically less than £10 million and 12 months in duration. The projects that we're doing, we're working in the live terminal, potentially very operationally disruptive, and also using the new construction framework. So you may have seen in the press over the summer that we've now introduced new construction frameworks. We've now got 17 contractors across civils, building and M&E working with us to deliver our major and small projects as well. So the projects that we deliver could be in all areas of the airport, from baggage, engineering, airfield to security and the terminal operation as well. And just to give you an example, we've got some projects at the moment replacing floor tiling in the middle of the south terminal, and I'll come on to some more examples in a minute. In fact, we've got some photos of some typical projects that we deliver. So for example, the one in the top left there is some HV cable replacement, which involved shutting off power supplies to the whole of the south terminal. As you can imagine, that terminal that was built back in 1950 has lots of legacy issues. The records are not always in the best form, and there's a lot of pre-planning work that has to go on. The project in the centre top there is a project we've just completed to resurface part of the taxiway. We did that project over a 24-hour period over the summer, working in the middle of the operational airfield in our busiest summer to date. And the amount of planning and liaison, not just with the airlines, with air traffic control, with all of our ground handling stakeholders as well, is immense to make that happen in a smooth way. Project in the top right is a project that's currently ongoing to reconfigure the baggage reclaim area in the North Terminal. So a very tight site, airside, live area with baggage trucks passing by on a regular basis, inside the terminal, working behind hoarding, and making sure that we can still deliver bags back to passengers on their return flight. The picture in the bottom left, is an interesting one. So a very simple project on the face of it, to put some bird netting across a watercourse just to the south of the main runway. So one of our main risks as a business is about bird strikes to aircraft. Key risk for any airport, and particularly when we've got lots of watercourses nearby. So the project that we've just completed actually was to put bird netting across that watercourse to stop birds being attracted and flying in there and causing safety risks. The challenge with that project was the fact that whilst we have pretty good services information across the airfield, we know that there's lots of unknown services. We have good GPS systems that can tell you, or GIS systems that can tell you where all our pipes and cables are, but they don't have everything in there. And we know from previous projects where we replaced a fire main in the airfield that over a kilometre we found 90 uncharted services, some of which might be fibres that connect in some way to the air traffic control systems, and so those are not things that you want to be hitting. So that project there involved piling 400 steel posts into the ground whilst aeroplanes are 60 metres away from us, and in the environment where we could potentially hit buried services. As a result, the contractor dug 400 holes by hand down to a metre depth to make sure that we didn't hit any services. We found 20 or so services that weren't on our plans, and we didn't hit anything. So that was a good project, but just gives you an understanding of some of the extra lengths we have to go to work in the environment that we're working in. A project in the middle, you might consider this completely trivial, refurbishing a set of toilets. These are probably the most complicated projects that we do at the airport. You wouldn't believe how many people have got an interest in toilets in some way or the other. And again, lots of legacy issues with existing plumbing systems, ventilation systems, closing areas off to passengers, wayfinding issues and so on. We delivered 5 or 6 toilet refurbishments over the last couple of years, each one of them with its own challenges. But that just gives you a flavour for the types of projects that we're delivering within the operations PMO team. So what have we learnt so far? So we had an independent review conducted about 18 months, 2 years ago by a company called IPA. I don't know, some of you in the room may have used IPA in the past. And this was a review of projects that had been delivered some time previously, so before we'd set up the small projects team and before we'd made some changes in our major projects area as well. And we quite like this summary diagram as an indicator of the areas that we want to focus on. So just to pick up a few of these areas that we've been focusing on, and I'll come back to a few of these later in the presentation. So team development, we have had an issue historically in the past where projects there's been a big handoff partway through the project delivery process, meaning that there's a lack of continuity from cradle to grave in the ownership of projects, which is something that we've addressed through the Ops PMO team. We have cradle to grave project managers who are responsible for developing the project right from the initial spark in the sponsor's head all the way through to seeing that project through on to completion on site and closing out all the documentation. Front-end loading I'm going to talk a bit about later on as well, but front-end loading is an area that we really have focused on. There's plenty of research that indicates that the amount of time and the quality of effort that you put in at the beginning of the project has direct results to the project's success at the end. Value improving practices are things like value engineering, constructability, engagement and so on, and this is probably something that we've considered to be a bit of a second order benefit to us. There's probably, when we did this review and over the last 12 to 18 months that we've been developing our processes and our approaches, this is something that we've sort of put to one side a little bit and get the basics right. And controls. So controls is an interesting one for us. So our team is very deliberately lean and mean. We're deliberately a low bureaucracy, fast-paced organisation, and having just the right amount of controls in that process for us is key. So when we did this work 18 months ago, we didn't have very much. We put a bit more in now, but that's the constant tension that we have in our team, and the reason that you won't see lots of detail about fancy systems and so on, because in the words of one of my colleagues, if it doesn't make the boat go faster, then we won't do it. So those 6 inputs there lead to a measure of the outcomes of the project. Very embarrassed to say that 18 months ago we couldn't provide the guys that did this review with any safety data. Pretty shameful, really. And that's an area that we've really tackled hard, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. Schedule, again, it was an area that got picked out. Against this backdrop of being lean and mean, low bureaucracy, originally the project team didn't have any sort of schedule at all, and we didn't have any measure of where we were on time and meeting the expectations of our sponsors. We now do have some planning, not at such a detailed level that the major projects guys do. We have it at a pretty high level, but at least it gives us a measure at the moment of whether we're delivering on plan for our sponsors or not. So I'm going to pick up some of those areas in a bit more detail now on the next slide. So moving on to EHS. So this is a really core value for our team. The thing that keeps me awake at night more than anything else is that we have the real ability to injure or kill people on a daily basis in the work that we're doing, whether it be service strikes, vehicle collisions, whatever it might be. So to the end of September, we had no lost time injuries. Unfortunately, we did have our first one in October, which was not good in 2 or so years of running the team. But what we have done is applied some really good practice environmental management techniques as well. So this is what we're interested in here is looking after the health and safety of not just our people but our assets and the environment as well that we're stewards of at Gatwick. So a couple of examples of how we're managing environmental impacts on our projects. The one on the left is a pond that we've recently desilted. We'd had some issues in the past about how we deal with that removed silt. We actually applied something called CLARE, which is to do with contaminated land in the real environment, and how you can remove contaminated land from site and reuse it. So we've actually taken that silt and used it to make some new ecosystems elsewhere on our airport estate, which has won some awards recently, which is really good news. We've gone from a problem to a really, really good benefit for the airport. And the one on the right is a piece of kit that we used when we were resurfacing those taxiways, used as a washout facility for the concrete vehicles. So rather than having the risk there that we'd wash high pH water and silt into our surface water drainage system, using that drive-in silt buster to wash down our vehicles. So some really good environmental practice going on, and really trying to push our performance on health and safety. I would say the real challenge for us is to get that EHS message down to the teams on the ground. You know, we'll talk in the office, we talk to the management teams and our contractors about health and safety. Do the guys on the ground at the coalface always get that message? I'm not sure. I think that's an area that we have to continue to work on. So that's our top priority as a team. Our second priority as a team in terms of delivering projects is what we call stable operations. So forget the time, cost, quality triangle for a second. We're interested in not killing and hurting anyone. We're also interested in not affecting the stable operation. So remember, as I've already said, these projects are right in the middle of passenger and airfield operations. And the one thing that we can't afford to do is get in the way of that. So we have a number of processes that get used across the airport to try and mitigate that impact. So the first one is the management of change. So this essentially is a risk management process that all of our projects go through whenever we do something in the live operation. So there's a daily meeting that our project managers turn up to. There's a risk assessment that's done by the project manager and validated by that group. And no work will go ahead, no permits will be released unless that management of change process has been followed and it's been signed off. And on particularly busy days, so Fridays in the middle of the summer, for example, some works might not get approved altogether, so we would actually stop work from happening. But that's much of that is all in the planning. Fire alarm activations and evacuations, really big issue for us as an airport. Clearly it's an inconvenience to passengers if they get turfed out of the terminal just as they're about to get on their plane. As a business for us, any evacuation costs us upwards of £30,000 per time in terms of lost revenue, so it's an issue for us and for our retail partners as well. So in terms of project delivery, that's a real risk for us with fire detectors that can be set off with hot works potentially or by dust. Planning fire alarm isolations in, planning that work so it mitigates that risk, reduces that risk is really, really important. Electrical isolations. So we showed you a picture earlier of the HV cables and the fact that we had to turn off various parts of the airport to put those cables in and get that project delivered. In that particularly old environment where the records aren't always great, it's quite a challenge to get that work planned in, make sure we know what we're switching off when we hit the button. Halting and wayfinding, clearly if we're doing work in the middle of the terminal, we have to be able to tell our passengers where to go, and we employ a strategy called disguise and distract. So if you're a passenger walking through the airport and you quite often see some nice pictures of London or other similar features on the wall, you can probably be assured that behind that wall there'll be some works going on. And we try very hard to make sure that work goes on with zero impact to the passenger. Hopefully the passenger doesn't even know it's there. And noise, similarly, having noisy works going on during the daytime and trying to conduct that operation doesn't always go together. So quite a lot of the work at the airport goes on at night to mitigate that issue. And the final one on there is is something that's probably come out in the last few months as a bit of a different way of trying to challenge our thinking a bit. And I know that the guys at the front who are in our major projects team have the same challenge as well. So not when we're putting a site up in the terminal, we don't just look around the four walls and go, what's behind that wall, who's working beside that. It's what's up, what's down. And if we're working above, say, the central search area where passengers are going through security, are we doing things that potentially could disturb assets in the ceiling, for example, that potentially could result from something falling through? So making sure that we cordon off that area, make it safe below and above, and not just, thinking outside the box in a very literal sense. So I talked about front-end loading as being key. So there's lots of research that's been done, and it won't surprise anyone in the room to find out that the more work you do at the beginning of the project, the more likely it is to succeed. And there's a tool that we use that's been developed by an organisation called the Construction Industry Institute in the US, called PDRI. It's a Project Definition Rating Index. And if there's one thing that you take away from this tool, I would suggest it's this, and it's well worth looking. I think it's well worth applying to your projects. And it's a tool that essentially is about getting alignment across your stakeholders for a project, and it's something that we've embedded in our processes, and it's a mandatory part of our process before any funds get released. And what it does, if you take the vanilla version that comes out of the US, is you go through 64 or so prompts about your project. So are you all agreed about what your project is trying to achieve? Do you know about the environment that you're building your project in? Do you know how you're buying your project? Do you know what the requirements are for documentation at the end of your project? And a whole range of those things. And it might seem like the most obvious thing in the world to be doing, but the number of times you have 20 stakeholders for a project in a room, and the project manager's going, yeah, I've done all that, got that, and everyone else in the room's going, looking at you a bit blankly, shaking their heads. And it's a really valuable tool just to get team alignment before you proceed with a project. We've had too many instances where in the past projects have been approved, project managers rocked up to an approval group and asked for money, and then turns out they hadn't thought of something. We hadn't got his stakeholders aligned. So that's our safety net to protect our project managers and make sure that we've done our work up front. And actually the research from the CII in the States indicates, I think, 29% design savings by doing more upfront planning, 30% savings in schedule, I think, from memory. So we've actually taken that standard version a bit further and made 3 airport-specific versions of the PDRI tool. So we've thinned it down. We've got down to about 25 questions, and we have an airfield version, a baggage version, and a terminals version, because the project considerations that we have in each of those areas of the airport are different. And so that covers all sorts of areas of project development, from the project strategy to responsibilities to deliverables and project control arrangements and so on. And the graph on the right just indicates what the output of that looks like. So you can do a PDRI review at any number of stages through your project, and the graph there just shows the expected tram line of your score as you go through the project life cycle. So by the time you get to final approval, you've got a design completed and you're about to set the contractor on his way, you should be pretty much right down on the right-hand side, scoring pretty low. If, on the other hand, you've just got the project brief in your hand and you don't really know what you're doing, you'd be right at the left-hand side with a pretty high score. So we use this as a method for making sure that our front-end planning is robust. And I'd say this has started to pay pretty big dividends in terms of the numbers of changes that we've had on our projects. Actually, I haven't included it here, but we have a graph that shows our number of project changes over time, and over the last year or so that we've been using this tool compared to the previous year, the number of changes that we're making to projects has reduced by at least a factor of 2. Very, very significant benefit, but from using that approach. So I said before that one of our mantras, if you like, of the team is working in a low bureaucracy environment. So some of the things that we don't do. We have a 4-stage process based on the APM methodology, so that's good. We train and empower all of our project managers. So we train all of our project managers in the APMP model, or the APMP qualification. that embeds the 4-stage APM model in their heads. They then come back to the office and they see a 4-stage project delivery model as well, which I'll show you in a minute. We want to use our new construction framework, so they build in things like KPIs and a more self-service way of doing procurement for us as well. So where the projects are pretty simple, which is low complexity, generally the projects that we're doing in terms of their technical complexity, there's a lot more self-service ability in terms of the procurement arrangements that we have. The environmental health and safety requirements are very much built into our process, so we have a very rigidly enforced permit to work system, which is all electronic, and our contractors have to put construction phase health and safety plans in as part of that permit process. So we're trying to build in as many of those legislative requirements into just how we do work at Gatwick. Management change we've spoken about. Minimal reporting, so I haven't got lots of fancy dashboards up here. We do project dashboards. We're very keen that we talk to our sponsors on a regular basis about whether we're satisfying their needs and whether we're making sure that we're delivering the projects according to what they expect. And we do that through a series of monthly meetings, one a week with each of our 4 key sponsors. And a project manager will stand up for 5 minutes, give an exception report, and then we all move on. And we very much have an approach of keep it lean, keep it mean, so if it doesn't make the boat go faster, we won't do it. So the team that we have is about 30 people in total. About 5 of those are in a central project controls function, managing commercial issues, schedule and governance and process, and the rest of the guys are out there delivering projects. And then finally, we have a project handover process. So at the end of the project, one of the things that we absolutely do have to get right to avoid all those legacy issues being carried forward is making sure we get the as-built details in, that we train the operational teams in what we've put in. So what does our 4-stage process look like? So very simple, it's 4 stages. This is an extract from our SharePoint system that we do have. This is our central repository for all of our documents in the PMO team. So not only this is all hyperlinked, so if you click on the health and safety box, for example, that will take you to where all the health and safety templates are, the statistics, the things that we need to do to maintain compliance. If you click, for example, on the procurement plan section, for example, there'll be a 1-page procurement plan that pops up. Very simple, very, very quick. All the project documentation is all stored in this system as well, just so we've got it all in one place. So the overheads, we are lean and mean, 25 people, maybe a couple more, delivering £55 million of investment. Those project managers, as I said, are cradle to grave. They own the project from absolute start to finish and got complete authority and empowerment to deliver that project in the way that they need to. And we do go out of our way actually to find project managers who are good at walking through walls. There can be a lot of barriers put up to getting things done around the busy airport environment, and we really look for project managers who have got that extra bit of vigour and determination to succeed, because it's not the easiest place to work sometimes. And as a result of doing all of that, we were set a target by our regulator at the last price review and for our overhead within projects, and we're outperforming that by at least 30%. So it's working from our point of view. So we're delivering, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've delivered £130 million of investment over 300 projects, all at a much lower rate of overhead than we're being expected to do. So success in our view. So what's next? There's a few areas that I'm targeting for the next year or so. Developments in EHS. So I spoke about the challenge that we've got to get the health and safety message right down to the guys on the ground who are delivering our projects for us. So it's all very well for us people in the office, project managers, cost engineers, whoever it might be. We're not going to be the ones that injure ourselves on our sites. It's the guys that we put to work to deliver those projects that are the guys that we're really putting in the firing line there. So the challenge that we've got over the coming months and years is to make sure we get that EHS message and the importance of just looking after each other down onto the guys on the ground. So that's a really key area for us. Controls enhancement. So one of the, our model is has been scaled already. So we started back in back end of 2013 delivering projects of we delivered about £5 million in the first year or so of our existence, and we're now delivering 55 million. And we've scaled and been able to maintain our way of operation. Next year we'll be delivering 75, 80 million pounds of investment. So one of the challenges that we have is then how do we get our arms around that from a controls perspective and make sure that we can we know where we are. So whilst we're not going to go out and invest in lots of fancy systems, we will be just trying to think about how we do scale up that controls piece. On-time delivery improvements, we deliver on time 82% of the time. That's not good enough, we need to do more. Using our new framework suppliers to driving a bit more challenge, a bit more innovation for our new framework suppliers is important to me, and using some of the new KPIs that we've got in our frameworks to help us to do that will be something that we'll be working on over the next 12 months. And looking at design processes as well. So as part of that front-end planning activity, making sure that we've absolutely got our design nailed down and agreed by all of our stakeholders, because it's still something we don't always get right. And yeah, scaling the team for what lies ahead, I think, is one of the challenges at the moment. And if you've been looking at our job site, you will have seen that there's been quite a few vacancies on there over the last few months. So, in summary, because I wanted to milk all these good photos that we've got, I should have said at the beginning, we had a guy called Jeffrey Milstein come and sit in a helicopter and take some pictures of Gatwick, and I thought it'd be a shame not to use them. So in summary, I've told you a little bit about Gatwick and our history and our capital investment programme. I've told you about how we operate as the operations PMO team. We're safe, we're lean, we're mean, we're quick delivery, we have good relationships with our supply chain. And I've told you about some of the things that we've really been working on improving over the last few months. So health and safety, stable operations impact, front-end planning using the PDOI tool, I think is a really key message to take away from that. So before I ask for questions, hopefully there's one or two things in there that give you some inspiration about how you can cut through the process and the bureaucracy in maybe your organisation and try and think of and improve project delivery back at your place by doing things a bit smarter and a bit quicker. So hopefully that was good. Thank you. Any questions? I'll come prepped for a second one-way question. Come on.
You say that today you're you're the lean, small, mean team. Was there a time when you were the big bureaucratic team, and how was that transition?
Yeah, so probably 3 years ago, all of our CapEx got delivered through a very big team, which is intentionally set up for delivering very large, major, complex projects. And the way things move very quickly at Gatwick, and it was almost overnight that we decided that we would implement that differently. And probably the reason that happened was that we were responding to a flooding event that you may remember from 2013 when we were all over the press and not in a good place. And as a result of that, we needed to move quickly. We had our directors in front of the Transport Select Committee, and we wanted to respond to that very quickly, very speedily, and that's where it started from. Actually, it was that event that triggered us to do things differently. But from then, it's then been about taking the projects at the smaller value end of the investment programme and putting them through the same route. But we still have our major projects team. That team is fine for what it does. It's delivering major projects. There's a lot more complexity, a lot more in there. So it's horses for courses. Thank you.